Tonight's breaking news that former Vice President Mike Pence has been subpoenaed by the special counsel investigating January 6 has potentially far-reaching legal implications for ex-President Donald Trump, of course, but also carries serious political implications considering the special counsel investigation is now heating up just a year before the presidential primaries get underway. It was almost exactly 1 year ago that Pence first drew a clear line between him and his former boss over the insurrection, and at the same time indicated he might be a candidate himself in 2024.
I heard this week that President Trump said I had the right to overturn the election. But President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president. Under the Constitution, I had no right to change the outcome of our election. And Kamala Harris will have no right to overturn the election when we beat them in 2024.
David Friedlander is a journalist who reported today in Political Magazine about how the GOP is starting to plot against Donald Trump. Mona Charen is a nationally syndicated columnist, policy editor of The Bulwark, and both join me now. Mona, let me start with you just about the political ramifications here. I mean, Pence is walking this really, truly, almost comically difficult tightrope, right? He wants the guy, he wanted his mob to lynch me. I loved everything we did together until that part, which I'm not a fan of, but we'll agree to disagree on whether I should have been lynched. But I won't cooperate with the January 6th committee, but now I've been subpoenaed. It seems largely impossible, but I do wonder what the political implications are here at your first blush.
Well, I mean, it's impossible to try to grasp how Pence wraps his brain on this particular axle, you know. As you say, you know, yes, he tried to kill me, but, you know, friends have their disagreements, right. I think is something along the lines of what he said. Yeah. But look, he is desperate for support. He wants to be president himself. Which is the disease that afflicts so many, and so he's going to try to walk, as you say, this tightrope. But look, I also believe that despite his having no spine, that there are some lines that Pence won't cross, as he demonstrated on January 6th. And I think one of them is probably he's not going to lie to the independent counsel, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
As your previous guests were saying, I mean, there may be delays, there may be court cases about whether he indeed needs to do this, but eventually he's going to have to.
Yeah.
And at that time, I do not think he will lie. I think he'll tell the truth.
Well,
and that's not good for Donald Trump.
Right, I agree with that. I also think I think that's true. I also think he's a little boxed in because he wrote a book about it. I mean, it's like, you know, that you could say, like, I don't remember, you know, it was a long time ago, but like when you've written a book in which you recounted one of the key conversations, you know, you got a little less wiggle room in terms of that. There's also, so you wrote this great piece about what Donor World is doing. So tell me first a little bit about your reporting, then I want to ask you about how this plays into it, because I think, honestly, the thing that looms over the year 2023 in all of Republican politics and then all of presidential politics is Donald Trump going to get indicted? And if so, what's that mean? What are big Republican donors doing to try to stop Donald Trump from being the nominee?
Well, these are folks who are like, I wouldn't call them like anti-Trump wing of the party, but the kind of non-Trump wing of the party. Like, they are concerned about Republicans winning, Republicans holding.
That's what they care about. Yeah. They think he's going to lose.
Right. And that's their thing. I mean, you know, if he were the nominee, they'd probably support him, regardless of what they say now. Ultimately, if it's him and Joe Biden or whomever, they probably support him. So they're worried about that eventuality and what can be done to sort of prevent what they see as a very flawed nominee, you know, from winning the nomination.
So then the question becomes, like, they're trying to kind of do a little bit of like money access control to keep the field narrow, right? But I do wonder, like, to the extent that Trump is either indicted or it looks like he's gonna, like, they're gonna have a harder time doing the field narrowing, I think, if people think, oh, well, maybe he'll be in jail.
Right. Well, somebody pointed out to me, which I thought was very smart, actually, it's like the weaker Trump looks, that just means you have more Republicans winning, entering the race. You have more Republicans entering the race, it means more likely that Trump wins because he has whatever it is, 30 to 40% of the vote, solid. So if there's like a 2 or 3 person race, maybe they can defeat Trump. If it's a 6, 8, 9 person race, he's got an advantage. Right.
And that, of course, is exactly the sort of perverse collective action problem that they face, that they're trying to kind of wall people off by being like, you're not going to get money.
Right.
We'll tell you. Right. I mean, you had a quote in there of like, we'll tell you if you can run.
Right. Like, no, it's sort of like this. It's like, go ahead. Feel free to run. Have a great time. Do everything you got to do. Come January, when Iowa caucuses, New Hampshire primary, if it's not happening for you, it's time to pull the plug.
The spigot's getting turned off. Then, so the big question here, Mona, and this is a question for everyone. It's a question for, honestly, it's a question for Jack Smith and Merrick Garland. It's a question for all of small d Democratic politics in the country, right? Which is what a possible indictment, which were it to happen, would do to his political standing. I think that, if I had to place a bet, it would increase it in the short term in the Republican Party. But I'm not sure that would last necessarily. But I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think this is actually hard to gauge because if you recall, after the investigation, or they called it a raid on Mar-a-Lago, after they executed the search, there was a tremendous rallying around Trump because he has inculcated in Republicans a real taste for victimhood. And so if he can then be the victim in chief again, that might be the one thing that would make them rally around him. I mean, he's leeching support right now.
Yeah.
But if he can, I can't rule out the possibility that if he's indicted, he can play up this, I'm being persecuted by the deep state business and cause a certain rebound. I don't know.
Yeah, and that is the nightmare scenario for the folks that you were reporting on. Because, again, their objection here is purely a matter of winning, right? Like, he lost to Joe Biden. He was clearly associated with candidates who underperformed by 4 or 5 points in the midterms. Yeah. It clearly cost them, I think, winnable seats, right? They just want to win.
Yeah.
So the worst case scenario for them is a situation in which his standing with swing voters or the general electorate declines even more because he's indicted.
Right.
But increases with the primary electorate.
Right. I mean, that's a situation it seems like we had the last couple of years, right? And like, that's their thing. They are, some of them are just furious with him. I mean, they're shaking with anger, in part because not only did he...
Boy, tough. I feel so bad for them. How'd they end up here? Poor guys.
But I mean, what they're angry about is also that he, not only did he endorse all these losers in the midterms, but he kept all this money. He's just sitting on a pile of money that he's raising and not spending.
It's almost like he is a con artist. Boy, geez, I wish there was like a fable about an animal that like someone took in a snake and then figured out that the snake would bite them.
Yeah, try that on stage. I think I've heard about it. Yes.
Well, I mean, the other thing here is there seems to be some. Let's show that bit from the Times article. There does seem to be a little bit of also there. So there's a strange thing that's happening too, right? Because that there's been a back and forth here. That lawyers of the Department's National Security Division have been discussing in detail a possible agreement to search Pence's house in Indiana for additional governor documents on a parallel track that's on the classified stuff, because they've now got 2 tracks going, and that Pence's advisors were incensed by disclosure of a pending search last week, blamed the department for leaking details to pressure them. So there's also this like back and forth with DOJ and FBI on this other classified documents track, Mona. I don't know what that amounts to in terms of the Pence people. No, it's fine. It seems like a nice. Is that a dog back there? It seems like a nice dog.
Yeah, it's a dog. Sorry.
But it does seem like there's some tension between them and DOJ, and this. They're now going to have to figure out what their next move is, right? And that's going to be a legal decision, but it's also going to be a political one, as Harry Litman was saying in the last block.
Right. If you don't mind, could I just go back to the earlier point about the money, though, real quick? Because David Friedlander's piece is excellent, but it's sort of giving me a little bit of PTSD as I think back to 2016, because what it requires is so much coordination and collective action on the part of these donors. First of all, let's remember, Trump, the money's irrelevant to him. He has all the money he can possibly want, as was just mentioned. It's irrelevant. It's whether they have pressure on other candidates. And in order to be able to effectively pressure other candidates, they have to all work in unison. How many donors are there? There are hundreds of them that are tremendously wealthy. Are they all going to come to some sort of agreement in a back room? Okay, it's going to be this guy or this gal and not the others. And this is the date on which everyone has to put their cards on the table or get out. I'm very skeptical that that kind of coordination is remotely possible.
Yeah, well, that's one of the big questions as we enter. There's a lot of questions, a lot of open questions about the next 6 months, particularly. But what this is all going to look like as we head into the real season after Labor Day of this year, I have no idea. I have no idea. He could be be facing charges or not, or he could be the front runner. Who knows? David Friedlander, Mona Charen, thank you both.